There was a stranger sitting in my chair. He was leaning back like he owned the place, legs crossed, glass of my bourbon in his hand, and smiling like someone who knew something I didn't. He called me champ. Twice. I hate being called that. My fork didn't even make it to my mouth before I asked, "I'm sorry, who are you?" He laughed. Laughed. Not like a nervous laugh either. The full-body kind. The "I've been waiting for this moment" kind. That's when I saw Marcy walk in behind him. She was wearing lipstick. Not just any lipstick. The dark red kind she used to save for anniversaries or when she wanted something expensive. Her hair was curled like she had an event to go to, and not like she'd just walked in from work. And she was holding a bottle of wine. Not the cheap kind we drink when her parents visit. The expensive Malbec I keep hidden behind the oatmeal canister. "Babe," she said, too casually, "this is Sawyer. He'll be joining us tonight." I blinked. Joining us for what? She raised her eyebrows like I was the crazy one. For dinner. Right. Family dinner. The one I host. The one where I cook for 7 people and stress for 2 days because I want her brother to stop calling my brisket decent. That family dinner. And now Sawyer, tall, tanned, smug-faced Sawyer, was somehow part of the guest list? Let me rewind a bit, because this wasn't normal. This wasn't like when Marcy brought her coworkers over that one time because they happened to be nearby. This felt staged, like a performance. I looked at her, then him, then her again, and I swear to you, something in my stomach twisted. I said, "Marcy, can I talk to you in the kitchen?" Sawyer raised his glass to me. "It's cool, champ. I'll keep the seat warm." That's when I knew something was really wrong. I just didn't know how deep the knife was going to go. In the kitchen, she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I'd just interrupted her Instagram story. "Why is he here?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Because I invited him." "Who is he?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "He's someone who makes me feel like I'm not suffocating." That sentence hit me like a punch in the throat. I couldn't breathe for a second. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how quietly and confidently she said them. I whispered, "Are you cheating on me?" She didn't flinch. She didn't say no. She said, "Don't make a scene. Not tonight. Not tonight." Like we were at some gala. She walked out, heels clicking on our hardwood like a metronome of doom. And I stood there in the kitchen, next to a pot of mashed potatoes I'd seasoned with smoked paprika, because she said it added depth, trying not to drop the serving spoon and scream. When I came back out, Sawyer had moved seats. He was now sitting at the head of the table. My spot. He gave me a wink and said, "Hope you don't mind, Chief. The lighting's better here." Chief. Champ. I was about 2 nicknames away from committing a felony. The rest of the family showed up 10 minutes later. And Marcy? She introduced Sawyer to them as her partner. Not her friend. Not her coworker. Partner. And I, the husband, was now apparently the guy who made killer sides. Everyone was too stunned to question it. Her brother tried to break the tension with a joke. Her mom sipped wine like it was anesthesia. I sat in silence, watching her pour Sawyer another glass with a smile she used to reserve for me. And the whole time I kept thinking, this is happening. This is really happening. And nobody's stopping it. But don't worry. I didn't take it lying down. Not for long. What happened next flipped everything, upside down. I didn't need a single bite that night. I sat there, half present, half frozen, pretending to sip water while watching this stranger laugh with my wife like I wasn't even there. Sawyer complimented the potatoes, my potatoes, and everyone awkwardly nodded. Even her brother, who hates carbs, muttered something like, "Yeah, pretty solid," just to keep things from getting weirder. I couldn't stop staring at Marcy's hand. She kept resting it on Sawyer's arm like it belonged there. I kept thinking, this isn't happening. This isn't real. Any second now, she'll break, apologize, say it was all some twisted prank. But she never did. In fact, she was glowing. Her cheeks were flushed like she was drunk on attention, not wine. And Sawyer? He was the kind of guy who talks with his hands too much, like every story he told needed its own choreography. He started telling this one story about a crazy trip to Costa Rica, and I realized something horrifying. Marcy had told me that story months ago. Word for word. She just changed the names. I'd thought she'd gone on a wellness retreat with her yoga group. Now I knew Serena and Tina were probably just code names for palm trees and bad decisions. I stood up to clear the plates, and that's when Sawyer stood up too and said, "Let me help you out, man." Man, Chief. Champ. I was building a mental list of all the condescending names he'd dropped so far. He grabbed my plate, walked right past me into the kitchen like he lived there, and asked, "Where do you keep your toothpicks?" My jaw actually dropped. He didn't say, "Do you have toothpicks?" He said, "Your toothpicks." Like he'd already claimed everything. Like I was the guest in my own home. He didn't even wait for me to answer. He opened 2 drawers, found the jar, popped one in his mouth, and flashed a grin like he'd just scored a touchdown. Then he walked back to the table and sat next to Marcy again, not even in the same seat, but closer. Too close. I stayed in the kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the sink. The hum of the refrigerator was louder than my thoughts. I felt like I was floating behind my own eyes. Like I wasn't in my body. I had questions, so many of them. But the worst part was knowing I'd never get honest answers. I knew she'd deny, deflect, gaslight me with that tired tone of, "You're overreacting again, Ernie." I wanted to scream. Instead, I wiped down a counter that didn't need wiping. After everyone left, the house felt like a cave. I stood in the entryway, staring at the scuffed floorboard I kept meaning to fix. Marcy came down the stairs in sweatpants, holding her phone like it was glued to her hand. She didn't even look at me. So, I finally asked, "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer right away, just kept scrolling. "Marcy," she sighed, like I was the one being difficult. "What do you want me to say, Ernie?" "I want you to say something. Anything. Explain to me why you brought him into our home. Why you sat there and let him act like I was a guest in my own life." She looked up, and I swear there wasn't even an ounce of guilt in her eyes. "I didn't let him. He just fits here now. And maybe you don't." That sentence, that exact sentence is what cracked my chest wide open. She said it like she was replacing a blender. Like I was just something she outgrew. I asked her, stupidly, "Do you still love me?" She paused. Not for reflection, but calculation. "I don't think I ever did the way you wanted me to." That one felt like getting punched through a mirror. She walked away, and I just stood there, in silence, like a ghost in a house where I still paid the mortgage. I looked around at all the things I'd picked out for us. The bookshelf she never filled. The wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. The paint color she swore she hated, but I kept because she once said it reminded her of spring. And then, I made a decision. No yelling. No begging. No breakdowns. I was going to tear down everything she built with me, piece by piece, starting with the lies she never saw coming. The next morning, I changed the locks. It felt pathetic, honestly, like putting up a baby gate after the dog already ran away. But I did it anyway, with shaking hands and a YouTube tutorial playing on my phone. I even switched out the keypad code, just in case Marcy thought she could wander back in like she hadn't gutted me in front of a dinner table full of people who now wouldn't even make eye contact with me in a grocery store. I didn't sleep. I spent the night on the couch staring at the ceiling, still dressed in the same clothes I wore to host what turned out to be my own emotional execution. I kept thinking about the little things, like how she used to snore when she had wine, or how she'd always hum the same off-key tune when she folded laundry. Now those memories felt like needles under my skin. Nothing was sacred, not even the hum. At 8:13 a.m., I emailed her a bullet point list. I kept it civil. She could collect her things that weekend. I'd be out of the house from noon to 5. I asked her not to bring him. I even signed off, "Best, Ernie," because for some reason I thought professionalism might disguise how shattered I was. She didn't reply. Instead, she showed up that night. At 9:46 p.m. I know the time because I was brushing my teeth when I heard the door open. Not knock. Open. I ran downstairs with toothpaste still foaming in my mouth, and there she was, standing in the living room like she forgot her keys at a friend's place, holding a reusable tote bag and chewing gum like this was some late-night errand. I choked out, "How did you get in?" She didn't even look up. "You forgot about the garage keypad." I had. I absolutely had. That thing had its own code, and I hadn't touched it since last Christmas. I felt sick. Like no matter what I did, she still had ways in, literal and emotional. She started walking toward the stairs. "Whoa, whoa," I said, stepping in front of her. "You can't just walk in here like nothing happened." She raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said I could come get my things. On Saturday, when I wasn't here." She scoffed. "Are you afraid of seeing me? Or afraid I might break a few more illusions you've been living in?" That line right there, it hit me harder than anything she'd said so far. Because yeah, maybe I was clinging to the illusion that some part of this could be fixed, or at least explained in a way that didn't make me feel like the stupidest man in America. She walked past me anyway, straight upstairs, like she owned the place. I followed her, partly out of spite, partly out of a need to protect whatever dignity I still had left. She went to the closet and started casually pulling clothes off hangers, humming like she was browsing a boutique. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and asked her something I hadn't dared say until now. Did you love him while you were still telling me you loved me? She paused, just for a second. That was all I needed to know. That's a complicated question, she finally said, folding a sweater. No, it's not, I snapped. It's a yes or no. Did you love him? She looked at me, then down at the bag. I don't think I knew what love was with you until I saw what it could feel like with him. My knees nearly gave out. She said it with pity in her voice, like I was some poor animal that didn't know it had been declawed. She didn't even sound angry, just tired, like my pain was boring her. When she finished packing, she walked to the door and looked back one last time. Not like in a movie, not with remorse. Just to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything. Good luck, Ernie, she said. You'll land on your feet. You always do. That's the thing, I don't. I never land on my feet. I land on my face, with everyone pretending not to notice the blood. But that night, after she left, something inside me snapped, not like a branch, but like a lever being pulled. I didn't want her back. I didn't even want closure. I wanted her to feel it. To feel the cold, the confusion, the humiliating silence. I wanted her to hear a pin drop in a room where people used to cheer for her. I wanted her to realize the man she tossed aside was the only one who ever saw her completely and stayed anyway. So I started digging. Into her life. Into his. I went places no emotionally stable person would go. And what I found was the crack in their glass castle. Just wide enough for me to slip in. I started with his name. Sawyer Calhoun. Stupid name. Sounds like a guy who owns a wine bar with no wine. I Googled him around 1 a.m., in the dark, with only the blue light of my laptop keeping me company. His LinkedIn photo had that same smug grin, the one he wore while eating my food, in my house, with my wife's hand on his thigh. His profile said he was a brand experience strategist, which I'm 90% sure means nothing. He had a podcast. Of course he did. I listened to 5 minutes of one episode called Manifesting Masculinity and almost threw my mouse through the drywall. But it was what wasn't on his LinkedIn that caught my eye. No mention of Marcy. No relationship status anywhere. No posts about being in love with my person or grateful for my queen. Not even a subtle birthday post like, this one makes my world brighter. You'd never know she existed. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't proud of her. He was hiding her. And suddenly, for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't just hurt. I was interested. So I started digging deeper. And I mean deep. Obsessively. I found an old college directory that listed his full name, a Reddit account he used to ask for date night ideas that impress without looking like I'm trying, and eventually, an Instagram account he'd deleted but hadn't removed from a caching site. That's where I found the photos. The old ones. Sawyer. With a different woman. Over and over again. Same smile. Same hand on the lower back. Same restaurant balcony angles. Her name was Celine, and she wasn't just a fling. There were 3 years' worth of posts, tagged locations, comments from her family. There was even a Valentine's Day video where he called her my first and last forever. I checked the timestamps. The overlap was messy. He had told Marcy he was single for 2 years when they met. That wasn't just a lie. It was a rehearsed lie. I didn't confront him. I didn't send a warning text. I didn't throw bricks through windows or leave passive-aggressive comments on his motivational reels. I did something much smaller. Much quieter. I sent him a box. Not from me, of course. That would have been stupid. It was a plain white package, no return address, sent from a fulfillment service using a prepaid gift card. Inside was a flash drive. On it were exactly 10 photos of him and Celine. One of them particularly spicy, taken in what looked like a hotel bathroom with a timestamp from the same weekend he and Marcy went glamping. I also included a note. Just 5 words. Printed in a default Times New Roman font. Does she know about this? That's all. No signature. No threats. Just a seed. A quiet, poisonous seed. The rest would take care of itself. A week went by. No word from Marcy. But then, on Thursday night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. A minute later, a voicemail came through. I listened with my heart pounding. It was Sawyer. His voice didn't sound so smug anymore. It cracked halfway through the message. He didn't accuse. He didn't threaten. He just said, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you've made your point. You've really made your point. That told me everything I needed to know. Something had cracked, and I wasn't even close to done. Marcy had built her new life like a house of cards, glossy, delicate, overconfident. I was going to be the wind. The first sign she was slipping came on a Wednesday. I was at the grocery store, the same one where she once made us test 6 different almond milks, because texture matters more than taste. I was standing in the freezer aisle, grabbing a bag of peas I wasn't even going to cook, when I saw her. Marcy. She was standing near the checkout, holding a basket with just a bottle of wine and a box of tissues. Her hair wasn't curled. No makeup. Eyes puffy. She looked unfinished. Not the glowing, polished version of herself she used to present to the world. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just couldn't handle another moment of pretending I didn't exist. I watched her from behind the end cap, frozen peas thawing in my hand, and felt something I didn't expect, calm. She walked out of the store alone. No Sawyer. That was when I knew the package had landed. Later that night, I went back to listening to her Spotify playlists. She never changed the password. I don't know if she forgot or just didn't think I'd still care. Maybe she thought I'd moved on. But I hadn't. Not even close. She had a playlist called Driving Alone. I checked it weekly. It used to be filled with dreamy alt-pop and acoustic covers of 80s love songs. That week, it was nothing but breakup ballads. Hollow, angry, sad. One track was literally titled The Knife You Left In. I smiled. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. No one calls at that time unless something's burning, bleeding, or broken. It was her. Marcy. I let it ring. I didn't want to hear her voice unless it was cracking. I wanted to hear that moment where the ground finally gave out beneath her, where she realized she was standing in a life she couldn't decorate out of regret. She didn't leave a voicemail. The next day, she called again. This time, she texted first. Please. I need to talk. I stared at the screen for almost an hour. I imagined her pacing in her apartment, or maybe Sawyer's. I imagined the silence she used to weaponize against me now, turning on her like a cornered animal. I imagined her standing in the kitchen holding a mug she didn't even want anymore, just to have something in her hands. I typed out a response, then deleted it. Instead, I went to her Instagram. She hadn't posted in 3 weeks. For her, that was a lifetime. Her last photo, a mirror selfie in a wine-colored dress with the caption, "Stepping into something new," was flooded with comments. Most were the usual, hearts, emojis, queen energy. But one stood out. It simply said, "Does he know about Celine?" I didn't write it. I wouldn't be that obvious. But someone did. Maybe Celine herself. Maybe a friend of hers. Maybe one of the quiet ghosts Sawyer thought he buried behind polished veneers and filtered quotes about ambition. Either way, the clock was ticking. Marcy was spiraling. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one card left to play. The one she handed me without even realizing it, back when she thought I was just a pillow to scream into. The one secret she told me when she trusted me the most. The one thing she made me promise never to repeat. And now? Now, it was going to be the nail in her perfect little world. But I wouldn't shout it. I wouldn't broadcast it. I'd whisper it. To the exact person who needed to hear it. And then walk away. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't watching the house burn down. It's handing someone the match and letting them light it. It's strange what people forget they've told you when they think you'll never use it. Marcy had this therapist, Dr. Landon. She started seeing him 3 years ago, around the time we had our first real marital implosion. I remember that time clearly because I'd made us matching passports for a vacation she never took, and she cried when I showed them to her. Not happy tears. The kind of crying that comes from guilt that hasn't figured out how to disguise itself yet. She used to come home from sessions buzzing. Not in a good way, like she'd just offloaded something radioactive and didn't know where the fallout would land. I always asked, was it helpful? And she'd say vague things like, it's just a lot to process. Or he says I need to stop apologizing for wanting more. I never understood if that was supposed to be about me, but I didn't ask. I was afraid of the answer. I remembered his name because once, in a rare moment of tenderness, she said, if I ever die dramatically, make sure Landon gets my journals. He'd get a kick out of it. Well, Marcy, you didn't die. You just killed something. And now it was my turn. I didn't want to weaponize therapy. That was never the goal. But she had made her mess look like my failure, publicly. I had been erased from our story like I was a placeholder boyfriend she forgot to delete before her real one arrived. So when I looked up Dr. Landon, found his professional site, and saw that he offered confidential contextual insights for partners navigating post-therapy conflict, I realized something. She gave me the match. I just had to strike it. I sent a message, short, respectful, carefully worded. I didn't rant. I didn't play the victim. I simply told him I had reason to believe Marcy had misrepresented a few key facts in their sessions, and that I felt it was affecting decisions she was making that were hurting a lot of people, including herself. I requested a single conversation. No expectations. Just clarity. He responded 2 days later. I was shocked. He remembered me. Apparently, Marcy had spoken about me in great detail. She had described me as emotionally unavailable, secretly resentful, non-confrontational to a fault, and so afraid of abandonment that he'd rather be ignored than disagree. Harsh, but not entirely false. I could have lived with that. But then came the bomb. She had told him, multiple times, that I had cheated with her friend's cousin, a bartender named Elise. That's when my stomach dropped. Because Elise isn't real. She doesn't exist. She was a fake person Marcy made up one night during a weird, wine-fueled fight because I said I didn't like how often she left town without telling me where she was staying. She accused me of projecting, said I was guilty about my own secrets. When I asked what that meant, she blurted out, "Elise." I thought it was just a drunken jab. I didn't know she'd carried it into therapy and turned it into canon. I told Dr. Landon the truth. About everything. About Sawyer, the dinner, the late-night calls, the cold stare in our hallway. I told him I had never cheated, not once, not even emotionally. That I had built our life with trembling hands and always said yes, even when I should have said no. That I hadn't defended myself because I didn't think I had the right to. He didn't say much. But at the end of our call, he said something that haunted me for days. "You've been edited out of your own story. You realize that, right?" Yes, I realized that. Too late, maybe, but I did. I didn't know if anything would come of it. Maybe nothing. Therapists aren't referees. But the very next evening, Marcy called again. I ignored it. Then she texted, "Did you speak to Landon?" I didn't reply. Then another. "Why would you do that? That was private. That was mine." And for the first time since this all began, I laughed. Out loud. Not because it was funny, but because of the audacity. After everything she'd taken, this was the part that felt like a betrayal to her. I sat with that for a long time. Then I finally responded. 3 words. "So was I." She didn't reply, but I knew she read it. The read receipt gave her away. I stared at those 3 dots for a full minute, hoping for a reaction, a scream, something. But the message never came. Just silence. The same silence I used to beg her to fill. The same silence she used to punish me. The same silence that now wrapped her like a noose. And I was done pulling the rope. I had one final move left. And it wasn't for her. It was for him. Because Sawyer didn't just have secrets. He had vulnerabilities. And I was about to become the worst kind of person. The kind who learned them. And waited. There's something almost perverse about learning what makes your enemy weak. Not just what they fear, but what they pretend not to. The mask they rehearse. The phrases they use on loop like affirmations. Hoping if they say it enough times, it might eventually become true. That's how I knew how to get to Sawyer. Not by shouting. Not by confronting. But by studying the cracks in his self-image until he stepped into them on his own. I started with his podcast. Buried in one of his earlier episodes, back when he didn't have sponsors or filters, there was a 37-minute ramble about how he was always the fallback guy growing up. He talked about never being the first choice, about how he reinvented himself after college. "I built this version of me because the old me was invisible," he said. "And I made a rule. Never again would I be second." That stuck with me. Because the night Marcy brought him into my house, he thought he was first. The alpha. The replacement. He wasn't. He was the rebound. He just didn't know it yet. I started showing up in places without being seen. A gallery opening I knew they'd attend. I was across the street at the coffee shop, watching them through the window. She smiled for photos. He kept one hand on her hip the entire time, like she was a trophy he didn't quite feel worthy of holding. She laughed too loudly. He looked over his shoulder too often. The body language was off, strained, performative. I could tell from the outside what they were trying so hard to hide on the inside. The cracks were already there. I just had to widen them. So I sent an email. Not to Marcy. Not to Sawyer, but to the event organizer. Under a fake name, I asked if they'd be posting the photos publicly. Just curious, I wrote. One of the guests looked a lot like someone involved in a messy situation at my company. Might want to double-check before publishing. The gallery account replied, "We've decided not to post them this time. Thank you for the heads up." Strike one. I didn't need to smear him. I just needed to plant a little uncertainty. And it worked, because a few days later, his Instagram went private. The podcast paused for a creative reset. His LinkedIn status changed from open to collaborations to nothing at all. He was pulling back. And when predators retreat, they start to doubt themselves. The final push came from an unexpected place. An old friend of his, someone I found through an alumni Facebook group, messaged me back after I asked a simple question. "Do you know if Sawyer ever resolved that thing with his certification? Just curious. I'm hiring in that field and don't want any drama." She replied 3 hours later. "Oh wow, I didn't know he told people he had one." And that's when everything clicked. Sawyer had been bluffing about credentials. His entire image, the brand strategist, the polished guru, the well-read, emotionally intelligent gentleman, it was smoke. Marcy didn't know. She had bought the image like a luxury candle. Expensive, pointless, and destined to melt into nothing under heat. So I made a burner account. I followed him. I waited a day. Then I sent him a private message. Not aggressive, just pointed. Curious. Did you ever end up finishing that certification you mentioned on Craig's podcast? Or was that more of a vision board kind of thing? He didn't respond. But 20 minutes later, the story with the quote about credentials being a mindset disappeared. Then a week passed. Then 2. No posts. No podcast. No brand. And then, Marcy emailed me. Not called. Not texted. Emailed. The subject line was, "Is this what you wanted?" No body text. Just an attachment, a photo. It was a picture of Sawyer's side of the bed. Empty. Sheets pulled off. His drawer open and half empty. A bottle of cheap whiskey on the floor. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. The war wasn't explosive. It didn't end with screaming or broken glass or restraining orders. It ended with a whisper of truth too loud for their house of mirrors to contain. I didn't ruin him. I let him ruin himself. And now, the only thing left was the reckoning Marcy never saw coming. The part where she turns around and realizes there's nothing left behind her but silence. Because in the end, it was never about winning her back. It was about making sure she never forgets the cost of burning the one person who never wanted to watch her fall. And yet, even now, even after all of it, I sometimes wonder, if she called me, really called me, with her voice shaking and her pride shattered, would I still answer? I don't know. But there's one part left of this story. The part where everything comes full circle. And I face the last person who deserves the truth. Me. It's strange how quiet the house became once it was all over. Not an eerie quiet. Not the silence that follows a slammed door or a long, sharp fight. This was something else. Softer. Heavier. The kind of quiet that asks you what kind of life you want to build next, now that the wreckage has settled and there's nothing left to fix but yourself. I stopped checking Marcy's socials. I stopped stalking Sawyer's ghost of a podcast. I deleted the burner accounts. I erased the folders I'd made. Yes, I had folders. Screenshots, recordings, notes. I kept them like someone might keep newspaper clippings of a disaster they survived, just to prove it was real. But I didn't need proof anymore. I lived it, and I didn't want to live in it any longer. I started doing small things. Simple things. Cooking meals for one without crying over the extra chair. Changing the photos on the walls. Swapping the wine glasses we picked together for plain ones I got from a thrift shop. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reclaiming the space she hollowed out and left behind. The turning point, weirdly enough, came at the farmer's market. I was trying to pick between 2 types of honey. I had a jar in each hand, completely frozen with indecision, because apparently I'm the kind of man who overthinks honey now, when someone behind me said, "The one on the right's better. It's local." I turned around. It was a woman, maybe mid-30s. Messy ponytail. Hoodie. No makeup. She didn't smile like she was flirting. She smiled like she just enjoyed helping a stranger. I thanked her, paid for the honey, and walked away. That would have been the end of it. But I saw her again the next week. And the week after that. Same booth. Same smile. Eventually, we started talking. Her name was Jules. She had a laugh that made people turn their heads, not because it was loud, but because it was real. She wasn't flashy. She didn't pretend to be effortless. She was kind, and she asked questions that didn't feel like interviews. I didn't tell her about Marcy. Not at first. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't want to hand her a broken version of me and expect her to do the cleanup. So I waited. Got to know her slowly. We started meeting for coffee, then weekend walks, then weekday dinners. Nothing fancy, just two people learning to be people again. When I finally did tell her, she didn't pity me. She just listened. And then she said something that stuck. You don't have to be someone's lesson to become your own story. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. Not with hatred, not with embarrassment, just honesty. I had spent so long being erased, replaced, doubted, and used that I forgot I still had a voice. I still had worth. I still had me. And I liked who I was becoming. Not perfect, not shiny, but real. A few months later, I got a message from Marcy. Just a short one. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're okay. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. I had already forgiven her. Quietly. Alone. On my terms. And now I was free. Free to wake up without checking old scars. Free to plan things without the fear of being left behind. Free to love again. Not just someone else, but myself. I didn't win Marcy back. I got myself back. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The end.